Now there is an issue with the time signature in the beginning, because the way it's notated, it's in 3/8, and it's supposed to be an upbeat of 1 beat and then a bar of 3 beats. So if we feel it in 3, I snap the fingers. That's like not the way we hear it normally. I can force myself to feel it that way when I'm playing, but when I'm listening to it, it's impossible to feel it that way, because the upbeat and the bar that comes, it's no change between them. It's just these 2 notes.
Right.
So it's impossible to hear the beat on the second pair. So what happens is we feel it as 1 bar in 4. And then
Okay, I have a problem with that. He is right that you can feel it in 4/8, and that can really help you like perform this piece. But I don't think that's really how the gesture goes. I feel really that kind of lean into the downbeat really helps with the flow. And he's talked a little bit about like how to perform this a little bit earlier. So he seems to be talking a lot about the performance of this piece, which I'm not really interested in, again, this analysis tutorial that he's doing. I want just like a good analysis of the piece. So let's see if we can find another video. All right, let's see what Stephen Jacks has to say.
We have E here and D sharp here. Now, that doesn't really tell us anything.
That's true.
It might be in the key of E or something, but it really helps to first look at our key signature.
Okay, he wants to look at the key signature. That's a good place to start. Let's see what he says.
Now, our key signature here has no sharps or flats, and we know from our experience in making scales that that means it's either C major, or it could be its relative minor of A minor. A minor. Okay, so how do we...
All right, well, that's it. Either C major, A minor, nothing else could possibly exist. Even though later on in this piece, it goes to B flat major with no key change. It goes to F major with no key change. So yeah, the key signature is a good place to start, especially if you're just beginning your music theory journey. You have to know all your key signatures and what the possible major and minor scales are. But even if it's at the beginning, we might have started in a different key area than what is in the key signature. And with no sharps and no flats, that'd be really easy. In fact, in more contemporary pieces, there's just no key signature ever, even if like some key areas are emphasized. So him starting with this like, oh, well, let's just look at the key signature and that's going to tell us everything, is like, again, it's a good place to start, but it's where a lot of people actually get tripped up because they'll be trying to figure out what's going on. And instead of looking at the actual notes and what's printed, they'll just look at the key signature and say, oh, well, it has to be like, I kind of get a minor sound here, so this just must be A minor, even though like the actual notes are maybe suggesting a different key. In this case, he's right, but my gosh, I think I'm just going to have to do my own analysis of this. So today, we're going to be analyzing some for Elise. I was originally thinking of just rating some analysis videos because there's a lot of them out there, but I feel like a lot of them just kind of haven't like hit the mark for me. And I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm not just going to be looking like right at the harmony or right at the melody or anything. I'm going to be giving a bit more of like an overview of this piece. So let's go ahead and jump right on in. I'm Dr. Zach. Grab a cup of tea and join me. All right, so here we are. Let's start our own analysis here. So I think everyone knows how this piece starts, right? In case you don't, it's the one everyone knows. So on and so forth. We could get a little bit into how there's like some meter things that are interesting, like we saw in one of the other videos, but I really wanted to focus on more of kind of an overview, see how Beethoven is treating some of the larger elements of the piece, and we can just kind of go through it that way. This piece really focuses a lot on E, right? I mean, there we get it 3 times right in the opening. Comes back, of course. We will see again some other kind of emphasis on this E. Now in the key of A minor, where A is our first note of the scale, or what we call tonic, we go up 5 notes. There there's the E, and that's called the dominant. So our dominant note here, right, that would be 5 dominant to 1 tonic. So we have this strong emphasis on the dominant, and its leading tone, or also just known as the half step below that note, D sharp, which in the key of A minor, D sharp is known as Fi, F-I. Because if we were to sing our do-a-deer solfege, we have do, re, me, fa is D, fi, D sharp, and then sol. Fi is the most common chromatic pitch in this kind of tradition. So that is not at all surprising that we see this Fi in the music. Now, if you are a different type of solfege system, such as law-based minor, right, we would have la, ti, do, re, re would be this note. But I am using a movable do minor system, which also uses the minor solfege. Okay, so the other kind of characteristic of this opening are these arpeggios, right? We have this, and then the next one, right? So all these kind of really open arpeggios. And that continues even after we get after the repeat here, right? We have this, again, really open. Lots of large leaps, right? So on and so forth. And then we get this kind of real obsession on E at the end of the line. Right? All E's. Again, it's just an emphasis on the dominant, but I think it's kind of interesting since this piece is for Elise, with E being the start of that. Maybe that's the reason why we see the pitch E show up so much. But that's just kind of speculation on my end. I haven't done any research to see if that's true, but that'd be kind of a neat tie-in. So this first section, if we just like took the opening and then played all the way through it, the repeat, and then we got to the end, right? Where we have this starting on the beginning of this line here. We could have a whole piece right there. That would just be kind of like some sort of a binary form where we have the first section and then the second section, right? However, Beethoven wanted to keep going. Beethoven wanted to keep writing some music, so luckily for us, we have more to this piece. Otherwise, this would be just probably some almost like etude-like student piece to help you practice your arpeggios. Let's continue on to the B section. So after the repeat, now we still have arpeggios, right? But they're no longer these really open arpeggios that we saw from the beginning. We instead have them kind of closed in what's known as Alberti bass. Right? So we maintained the arpeggio idea from the first section, but now the arpeggios are just different, right? This is a really great way to help your piece sound really coherent, is using the same thing but differently, right? We have arpeggios in both, treated just a little bit differently here in the B section. Now, one kind of interesting part about this is right here at the beginning of this line where we have this. A really common thing to do here in this kind of style would just be to kind of sequence that. So it'd be. Right? So we just have that same kind of flourish. Then we land on the E in the next measure. But instead, Beethoven does this. Excuse my left hand. So that D sharp makes its appearance again, our Fi in this key, right? Because I think we had that in the beginning so much. So instead of just choosing to sequence this, which again would be very common to see in this period, we get this little gesture again that reminds us of the opening figure. Overall, this part starts in F major, right? We get this really strong kind of figure to get us into F major. Definitely an F major there, right? Here we hear. This sounds like where our home note should be instead of here, right? Which is where we started. Here's our home note. Now here's our new home note. Okay, so we start in F major. Now, where's F major in relation to A minor? Well, we can see it's 3 notes below, starting at A, counting as 1, which again is a weird thing in music that we start on 1. But we have 1, 2, 3 notes below. Okay, so there's our third below, our tonic pitch. And then later in this section, we get a modulation to the dominant of F. Remember, dominant meaning the 5th note. So here, we end up in C major, right around after that figure that I pointed out with the D sharp. Right? So we have this. A lot of kind of confirmation of C major here. So this is our new home note, especially if I get the left hand in there. Right? That really reinforces the C major feeling there. Now, where is C major in the key of A? Well, it is 3 notes above our tonic, right? So we went 3 notes below, then we went to the dominant, which again, that move is really typical, but that just kind of ends up 3 notes above our tonic. However, how do we get back to our original theme here? Well, we get this kind of figure, right? Which of course is a riff on the opening, and then it goes on and on and on and on. So we end up going to this emphasis on the 5 of A. There's the 5th note. So I think this is the kind of cool part about how Beethoven used a really common trope of modulating to the dominant to kind of connect these sections together. He started by going a 3rd below our tonic, right? We are in F major here at the beginning of the B section. And then he modulates to the dominant, but instead of then going from C major straight into A minor, he goes up to E major here, which then takes us back to A minor. So we started a 3rd lower than the tonic, and we ended on C, which is a 3rd lower than the dominant of our A minor key. So it's a really kind of clever way to incorporate these different sections using the harmony. So then of course we get our return of our A, which is what we expect. This form is called Rondo Form, which if you think about it, we kind of like keep coming back around to the first thing that we heard. That's not really where the word comes from, but that's how I like to think about it. So we start with our theme, then we have something different, which was what we just heard. Now we come back with our theme. We're going to have something different again, but we come back with the theme, right? And each of those different sections are unique and have separate kind of identities. So we get this back into the A section. We still have our obsession on the E, right? And what we miss from this return is we don't get that material after the repeat from the beginning, right? And that's also pretty common. Since we are going to hear this A section, this first section kind of over and over and over, we don't need to hear all of it all the time, right? So we can like kind of take some of it out and it still sounds pretty coherent. So that brings us to our next different section, which we'll call C, because this is the 3rd kind of idea that we've seen, right? And here we maintain now that A minor identity. Right? I wonder if we're in A. The answer is yeah, of course. So that's something that's very different. Before we've always seen kind of these arpeggio figures, but now we get this obsession on A. We've kind of had that obsession on E before, but now we get it on the A. So this is kind of really reinforcing that we're in the key of A minor here. And for any of you wondering like, oh, but what about all these accidentals? This is what we call a secondary leading tone chord. So this chord goes to this chord, which is a chord in the key of A minor. And then this is, again, the leading tone chord of A minor. And you think, well, what about the A that keeps on going in the bass? What is that doing? Well, the answer is, if we just pushed and held this A, right, that gets pretty much the same effect. It's almost as if I pushed the note and then held the pedal down and let it continue all the way throughout. So this is what we call a pedal tone or a pedal note. And when we have a pedal tone, we don't consider it as part of our analysis because it's just kind of doing its own thing. It is irrelevant to the rest of the chords. So then when we finally get a change from this single note A, what do we get? We get D sharp. Aha, right? So here Beethoven has once again found a way to sneak D sharp in, which relates back to our opening figure. And then we have kind of some pretty typical stuff. But again, Beethoven didn't have to use that D sharp there, right? He could have figured out another way to make this kind of cadence happen. What do we get then later? We get this B flat coming in. Okay, so that's a little unusual. Now we have like a B flat major chord here, and we even sit in the key for a little bit. Where's home? Right there, right? A minor. So some other ways that this contrasts what we've had come before is, our right hand has always been pretty active on the treble notes, but now we have like a really static right hand, right? We just have kind of these big chords where the left hand then gets a little bit more of the activity. This is also really tense and dramatic here, right? We have all of these really dissonant chords, and then later. So this is kind of the most tense episode, which the episode just means not what the theme was. So this is the most tense episode that we've gotten so far, which again makes sense because you want kind of your most tension and drama to happen closer to the end, right? Rather than having the tension all the way up front, then everything else kind of just sounds bland. I think one of the reasons we end up in B flat major here is because then we can get to this E flat. Now, what is E flat but D sharp, right? It's just respelled. So I think this is kind of a clever way to use the D sharp, which seems to be a really kind of important figure in this piece, in a new way, in a new context of another key. So then what happens when we get to the end of this just repeated bass with more stagnant right hand? We get something that I would have to practice, right? We have this really fast triplet arpeggios. And again, arpeggios, where have we seen that before? Well, we saw that both in the A and the B section. So this is kind of coming back to that also with the right hand being so kind of stagnant this whole time. And again, it could be even more stagnant, but it does have some motion. But comparatively, there's a lot less motion in the right hand. And so it kind of makes up for that by having this huge flourish here at the end. Also, you might ask, why 16th note triplets? Well, if you look at our figure here, which we can kind of see our A section comes back, our right hand and left hand are broken into groups of 3, even though they aren't triplets, right? They're going 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. And so I believe that the triplets here at the big flourish are supposed to kind of represent the fact that we had that group of 3 between the right hand and the left hand. I think that's kind of where it comes from. And then when we get all the way to the top here, we have all those chromatics. That's like the furthest extension of this just chromatic idea, right? This chromatic, of course, just means playing from one key to the very next key. And then when we play all chromatics like I just did, right, we're just literally playing all the keys in order. So this idea in the beginning is chromatic. And so we've kind of taken that idea to its furthest extension by having this huge chromatic run right before we get our final return to the A section. So our final return to the A section, it's complete. We get both kind of like the first part and the second part of that, just without the repeats. And we get this chord at the end. We have this. So this is an interesting point. I said we have a chord at the end because most people nowadays, when you hear it, they do something like this. Or with the right octave. There you go. So they add a note in order to make this sound more finished. Let me play it how it's written in this manuscript first. Now that has a nice kind of characteristic of its own. It's kind of haunting just to end on the octaves like that with no other information. But listen to how it sounds with the other note. Right? Most people are going to say that sounds a little more satisfying because we have that harmonic information with the C natural. Okay, and then some people take it a step further by changing this note at the end, the E, to a D. So we get even more of that kind of like strong resolution to A minor. Maybe it's supposed to be like that. Maybe it's not. Again, the manuscripts that this came from, like sometimes they're really trustworthy and you can say, oh yeah, absolutely, just octaves at the end. Or sometimes it's like, well, one manuscript says one thing, one manuscript says the other. And so we just kind of go with the most reliable one, in which this case it's just octaves at the end. But that doesn't mean that we can't add something to it, right? In fact, Beethoven was a really, really accomplished improviser. And so he would be adding things to music all the time. We've kind of reached this point in music where we take the printed manuscript kind of as the law. And the truth is that you can kind of sometimes play with these things, especially if there's like an ornamentation, right, where you kind of add some notes around the notes that already exist. But like here at the end, there's absolutely nothing wrong with adding the extra note at the end, but just know that that's kind of like a performance choice that you have to make, which a lot of really accomplished pianists have made. So like, I don't think that's, a bad thing. I think if, a more novice composer had this idea, it probably would have turned out something like this. Oh, we start on E, so this piece is going to be in E minor, which would sound something like this. Right, and you could keep on going. Right? It's just like kind of the same melody and everything, but we started on E, so, oh, well, we must just be in E minor. Right? But Beethoven, he starts on the dominant. So we get just a little bit of a difference. A lot of beginning composers really like tonic because that's our home note, right? So if they start in a key, they'll start on tonic, they'll end on tonic a lot of the time, and it just doesn't have that same sort of vibrancy that you get by starting or ending on other notes in the scale. So that's just a little tip for you. If you are writing your own music, just try to avoid tonic if you can. And you'll see that, like in the case of this piece, it ended up sounding really great. I do have one argument against, like, again, that video we saw near the beginning of having this start in 4/8. The presenter mentioned like, oh, well, you can, instead of thinking this as a pickup, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2. Right? So you can just think about it in 4/8. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, what I think is happening here is Beethoven has specifically notated it this way, because by notating it this way, it kind of obfuscates the meter, right? Because like, I mean, we had the presenter who said this is 4/8. It's like hard to tell, right? because that E to D sharp really is acting like a strong pickup, but then we get it again immediately. And so it's kind of like, whoa, what's happening? I think the pickup really works though because of how you play it, right? Right? I really feel that kind of lift into the first measure. Whereas if you start with it thinking, oh, this is a downbeat, right? We would put a lot more emphasis on it. And if I really like show the traditional way of playing a 4/8 bar, which would be emphasis on 1 and 3, it'd be this. Versus a 3/8 bar, we would get this lift and then an emphasis on the downbeat that occurs as printed. So which one did you like better, right? It's possible that you like the 4/8 better, and that's like up to you. That's your interpretation of the piece. I personally think the pickup into the downbeat works really well. Also, to really drive at least my point home, we could put a like 4/8 pattern under this and see what you think it sounds like. Right? I just don't think it works quite as well. So that is everything I have on our analysis portion. Again, I was just trying to look at kind of some more broad subjects and give you kind of an overview for some of the techniques, how he tied some of this stuff together, and what I think is happening in the piece. There are tons of like harmonic analysis type videos out there. So if you're really interested in the harmony, you can go check those out. I also don't agree with all the harmony analyses, but if you're like really interested and this video like takes off, we can also do a harmonic analysis if there's enough interest. All right, so that does it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed my take on it. Again, I didn't go super in depth with like every single note, measure, phrase, etc. But I hope you enjoyed what we covered. And if you want to learn more, go ahead and let me know and I can make another video. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.